The contract came through the usual channels. A coded message on the dark networks where mercenaries found their work. The client offered 5 million credits for what seemed like simple job. Kill everyone at a small research station. Leave no survivors. Ask no questions. Vextar read the message 3 times. His blue-scaled fingers moved across the holographic display in his private quarters aboard the warship Fang of Night. As leader of the Crimson Talons, he had seen thousands of contracts over the past 20 years. This one looked almost too easy. The target was a human research outpost on some backwater planet called Kepler 442b. Only 12 humans worked there. The intelligence file said they were scientists studying plants and animals. No military training. No heavy weapons. Just soft creatures from a world the galaxy barely knew. Vextar had heard of humans before. A new species that had recently joined the galactic community. They came from a planet called Earth. The report said it was a moderate world with reasonable weather and friendly animals. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that would make strong warriors. He walked to the bridge of his ship. The Crimson Talons owned 6 vessels in total. Warships built for killing and destruction. His crew included over 200 of the galaxy's most feared fighters. Zephyrians like himself made up the command structure. Their blue scales and sharp minds made them excellent leaders. The heavy assault troops were mostly Gorvani. These massive creatures stood 8 feet tall and weighed as much as 3 humans. Their thick gray hide could stop most weapons. Their forearms each held the strength of 10 lesser beings. Thrakton commanded the Gorvani forces. He had never lost a battle in 30 years of warfare. The Klaxi provided technical support. These insect-like beings had compound eyes that could see in many different light types. Their 6 limbs could work on complex machines while their minds calculated battle plans. They moved fast and thought faster. A few other species filled special roles. Snipers from the desert world of Kethmore. Pilots from the gas giant moons of Xerion. Engineers from the factory worlds of the hegemony. All proven killers who had earned their place through blood and victory. Vextar called his commanders to the war room. The chamber held a large table with holographic displays. Star maps covered the walls. Weapon racks lined the space between tactical screens. This room had planned the deaths of millions across dozens of worlds. Thrakton entered first. The massive Gorvani had to duck through the doorway. His 4 arms carried his favorite weapons. A plasma cannon that could melt steel. 2 vibro blades that cut through most armor. A gravitational hammer that could crush bones to powder. Scars covered his gray hide from countless battles. Another hunt begins, Thrakton said in his deep voice. Who do we kill this time? Humans, Vexitar replied. 12 of them on a research station. Thrakton laughed. The sound echoed off the metal walls like thunder. Humans? The soft skins from that garden world? This is not work for warriors. Send a single squad. We will be done before the sun sets. Klaxi Commander Zithak clicked into the room. Her compound eyes scanned the tactical displays while her 6 limbs worked on portable computers. Data flowed across multiple screens as she accessed the intelligence files. Target analysis complete. She buzzed in the rapid speech of her kind. 12 humans. No military records in our databases. No weapon signatures detected. Standard shields and basic plasma turrets for protection. Estimated resistance time, 14 minutes maximum. Other commanders filed in. All veterans of hundreds of battles. All confident in their skills. All ready to add 12 more deaths to their long list of victories. Vextar activated the holographic display. The image showed a green world with blue oceans and white clouds. It looked peaceful, almost pretty. Nothing like the harsh worlds that bred strong warriors. Kepler 442b, he said. The target is Dr. Lisa Murphy and her research team. They are studying local plant and animal life. The client wants them eliminated completely. No survivors. No witnesses. The commanders studied the tactical information. The research station sat in a valley surrounded by forests. A single landing pad served as the only clear space for ships. Basic defensive systems protected the main buildings. Everything looked standard for a civilian outpost. The payment is 5 million credits, Vextar continued. Split among all crews as usual. We move out in 6 hours. Full battle deployment. I want this finished quickly and cleanly. Thrakton's laugh filled the room again. 5 million credits for 12 soft researchers? Either the client is very stupid or very afraid. What could humans possibly do that requires the full strength of the Crimson Talons? Zithak's computers chirped with new data. Additional information acquired. Humans come from designation Deathworld in some databases. Classification appears to be error in translation software. Their planet shows normal parameters for life-supporting environment. Vextar nodded. He had seen similar translation errors before. Different species use different terms for the same things. Some cultures called any world with life a death world. Because it could kill visitors through disease or poison, it meant nothing. What weapons do they carry? Asked Kethmore Sniper Silthan. His yellow eyes gleamed as he cleaned his rifle. I prefer to know my target's capabilities. Standard plasma pistols for station security, Zithak replied. Some industrial tools that could be used as weapons. Mining explosives for their research work. Nothing that poses threat to armored troops. The meeting continued for another hour. They planned the approach route, assigned target zones to each team, set up communication schedules, prepared for orbital bombardment if needed. Every detail received attention from experienced military minds. As the commanders left to prepare their troops, Vextar remained in the war room. Something about this job felt different. Not wrong exactly, but strange. Why pay 5 million credits for such an easy target? Why demand complete elimination instead of simple evacuation? He pushed the thoughts aside. In 30 years as a mercenary, he had learned not to question client motivations. They paid for results. The Crimson Talons delivered those results. Everything else was just curiosity that could get warriors killed. 6 hours later, the mercenary fleet entered hyperspace toward Kepler 442b. In the troop compartments, soldiers prepared weapons and armor. Veterans shared stories of past victories. Young fighters dreamed of proving themselves in battle. None of them knew they were flying toward a world that would change everything they thought they knew about war, survival, and what it truly meant to be predators in a galaxy full of prey. The journey would take 4 days. 4 days of confident preparation before they learned why even veteran killers flee when Deathworlders arrive. The Crimson Talons dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442b system. Vextar stood on the bridge watching the green and blue world grow larger on the main screen. It looked just like the intelligence reports described. Peaceful, quiet, safe. Scanning the planet now, reported Zithak from her station. Her 6 arms worked on multiple consoles while her compound eyes processed data streams. Confirming 12 human life signs at the research station. No additional personnel detected. No military vessels in orbit. Vextar nodded. Everything matched their expectations. This would be over quickly. The research station sat in a wide valley between rolling hills covered with thick forests. 3 buildings formed the main complex. Living quarters, laboratories, and equipment storage. A landing pad could handle small ships, but nothing larger than supply vessels. Basic defensive systems active, Zithak continued. Energy shields at 20% power. Plasma turrets show minimal charge levels. Standard civilian protection only. Thrakton joined Vextar at the main display. The massive Gorvani carried his weapons and wore his battle armor. Dark metal plates covered his gray hide. His 4 arms held different tools of destruction. Look how they built their station, Thrakton said with amusement. Right in the open. No high walls, no hidden bunkers. These humans know nothing about warfare. On the surface, Dr. Lisa Murphy looked up at the morning sky through the laboratory window. She was a tall woman with brown hair tied back for practical work. Her hands moved steadily as she prepared plant samples for analysis. 20 years of scientific research had taught her to stay calm under pressure. Jake, she called to the next room. We have visitors. Captain Jake Collins walked into the laboratory. He was a former Marine with short gray hair and steady eyes. Scars on his hands showed years of military service before he took this peaceful job. His movement was quiet and controlled. I see them, Jake said. looking at the display screen that showed 6 ships approaching the planet. That's a lot of firepower for a research station. Dr. Murphy's assistant, Amy Carter, looked up from her computer. She was young with blonde hair and nervous energy. Should we call for help? Send a distress signal? Jake shook his head. No point. Help is weeks away. Besides, they're jamming our long-range communications already. The other members of the research team gathered in the main laboratory. Sam Rodriguez was a former Army Ranger who now worked as the station's maintenance chief. Lisa Hayes had been a Marine before becoming their security specialist. Kevin Brooks was a botanist who studied the local plant life. Nancy White was a geologist who mapped the planet's mineral resources. Even the civilians had interesting backgrounds. Dan Miller was an electronics expert who had served in the Navy. Rachel Brown had been an Air Force communications specialist. Tony Clark was a former soldier who now handled supply logistics. Alex Johnson was the youngest member at 25, fresh from college but surprisingly calm. 12 of us, Jake said quietly. Maybe 200 of them. Professional killers. By the look of those ships. Dr. Murphy continued working on her samples. Her hands never shook. Then we better make sure those aren't good odds for them. Amy Carter stared at her. What do you mean? How can 12 people fight 200 soldiers? Jake smiled. It was not a nice smile. Amy, where do you think we come from? Earth, she replied, confused. And what kind of world is Earth? Amy thought about it. She remembered her childhood, hurricanes that destroyed cities, earthquakes that swallowed buildings, volcanoes that buried entire regions, diseases that killed millions, animals that hunted humans for food, weather that could freeze or cook a person in hours. A dangerous place, she said slowly. The most dangerous place in the known galaxy. Jake agreed. Every single day on Earth, something tries to kill you. The weather, the animals, the diseases, the planet itself, other humans. We survived all of that for millions of years. Sam Rodriguez checked his equipment while Jake talked. He found mining charges, industrial tools, and emergency supplies. Everything could be turned into weapons with the right knowledge. These aliens come from civilized worlds, Sam said. They built technology to make life safe and easy. They forgot how to survive when everything goes wrong. The alien ships entered the atmosphere. Atmospheric friction heated their hulls as they descended toward the research station. Landing thrusters fired to slow their approach. 6 vessels touched down on the landing pad and surrounding areas. Ramps lowered from the ships. Armored figures marched out in perfect formation. Zephyrian officers led squads of Gorvani assault troops. Klaxi technicians carried scanning equipment. Other species filled support roles. Vextar emerged from the command ship wearing his ceremonial armor. Blue scales gleamed under the alien sun. His weapons hung from his belt like symbols of authority. Behind him walked Thrakton and the other commanders. Attention, humans, Vexitar spoke through external speakers. You are surrounded. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be quick. No answer came from the research station. The buildings seemed empty and quiet. Scan for life signs, Vextar ordered. Sithak's equipment showed heat signatures moving inside the buildings. 12 humans confirmed. They appear to be packing supplies. Thrakton laughed. They think they can run away, on foot, carrying bags. This becomes more amusing. The mercenaries advanced on the research station. Their weapons were ready. Their formations were perfect. Their experience showed in every movement. This was how professional soldiers moved, when victory was certain. The humans abandoned their buildings just as the mercenaries reached the outer walls. 12 figures ran into the forest carrying backpacks and basic equipment. No heavy weapons, no armor, no vehicles, just people running into the woods like frightened animals. Pursue them, Vextar commanded. Full squads, drive them toward the killing ground in the eastern valley. The mercenaries followed the humans into the forest. Trees rose hundreds of feet above the ground. Thick undergrowth covered the forest floor. Vines hung between branches like natural ropes. Streams cut through the landscape, carrying clear water over smooth rocks. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. It looked like paradise. The humans seemed to vanish into the green shadows. One moment they were visible running through the trees. The next moment they were gone. The mercenaries spread out to search for them. That was when the first soldier disappeared. Gorvani Trooper Haktin was checking behind a large tree when something struck him from above. No sound. No flash of weapon fire. He simply fell to the ground unconscious. When his squad found him minutes later, his weapons were gone and his armor had been stripped away. Ambush tactics, Thrakton reported to Vextar. Primitive but effective against single targets. More soldiers vanished over the next hour. Always alone. Always when separated from their units. The humans seemed to know exactly when and where to strike. They took weapons, equipment, and supplies, but left the unconscious soldiers alive. Zith-Ax scanners could not track the humans through the dense forest. Life sign readings scattered by vegetation, thermal imaging blocked by canopy coverage, motion detectors confused by native animal activity. Vextar began to feel the first hint of concern. This was taking longer than expected. Professional soldiers should not be losing track of 12 civilians in an open forest. As night fell, the temperature dropped. The mercenaries set up camp in a clearing, using portable lights to push back the darkness. They posted guards and activated perimeter sensors. Everything was done according to standard military procedure. During the night, 3 more soldiers disappeared from guard duty. Their posts were found empty. Their weapons were gone. Their communication equipment had been carefully dismantled and removed. In the morning, Vextar found a message carved into a tree near his command post. Simple letters cut deep into the bark. The message was short and written in common galactic script. Welcome to Earth. Thrakton stared at the carving. This is not Earth. This is Kepler 442b. Vextar felt something cold move through his chest. For the first time in 30 years of warfare, he began to understand that he might have made a terrible mistake. The humans had not fled in panic. They had retreated to ground of their own choosing. The second day in the forest brought new horrors for the Crimson Talons. What started as a simple hunt had become something else entirely. The mercenaries found themselves jumping at shadows and checking empty spaces behind trees. Vextar studied his tactical display in the command tent. Red dots showed the positions of his troops. Blue dots marked the last known locations of the humans. But the blue dots kept moving in impossible ways. They appeared in places his scanners said were empty. They vanished from areas his soldiers had surrounded. Status report, he demanded. Thrakton's voice carried a tone Vextar had never heard before. Uncertainty. 15 soldiers missing. All found later. Unconscious but alive. Weapons and equipment taken. No serious injuries, but... He paused. But what? They are frightened. Veterans who have faced plasma cannons and gravity bombs are afraid of humans carrying sticks. Outside the command tent, Gorvani Trooper Greknal sat by himself cleaning his remaining weapon. Yesterday he had carried a plasma rifle, 2 side arms, and a vibro knife. Now he had only a basic pistol. The humans had taken everything else while he slept. But that was not what bothered him. What bothered him was how they had done it. He remembered waking up to find a human female standing over him. She was small and young with blonde hair. She could not have weighed more than half what he did. She held his plasma rifle in her tiny hands like she had been born to use it. Sleep, she had said quietly. You're not dead because we choose mercy. Then, something had stung his neck and darkness took him. When he woke hours later, she was gone. His weapons were gone. His armor was gone. But he was alive and unharmed. Greknal had fought in 30 battles across 12 worlds. He had killed creatures, twice his size, with his bare hands. He had walked through enemy fire without flinching. But something about that young human female had filled him with terror he had never known before. In the forest, Dr. Lisa Murphy crouched behind a fallen log and watched the mercenary camp through stolen binoculars. Sam Rodriguez lay beside her, his face painted with mud and plant dyes. They wore clothes made from local materials that helped them blend into the forest. Count? she asked quietly. 173 still active, Sam replied. We've taken out 27 without killing anyone. Jake thinks we can get another dozen tonight. Lisa nodded. They had discussed this strategy for months during the quiet times at the research station. If professional soldiers ever came to kill them, how would 12 humans survive against overwhelming odds? The answer was simple. They would not try to win through direct combat. Instead, they would make the enemy defeat themselves. Amy Carter crawled up beside them carrying a backpack full of improvised devices. The young woman had changed dramatically in 2 days. Gone was the nervous assistant worried about her research work. In her place was someone who moved through the forest like she belonged there. Perimeter sensors disabled, Amy reported. Dan says their communication array will fail in about 6 hours. Rachel is jamming their satellite links right now. Lisa smiled. The humans were not trying to fight 200 professional soldiers. They were systematically destroying the things that made those soldiers effective. Take away their technology, their communications, their confidence, and they became just frightened creatures in an unfamiliar place. Meanwhile, the humans grew stronger every hour. This was what they had been born for. This was what millions of years of evolution had prepared them to do. Survive when everything tried to kill them. Jake Collins observed the enemy camp from a tree branch 60 feet above the ground. His Marine training had taught him many skills, but growing up on Earth had taught him the most important one: how to find advantages when none existed. Below him, alien soldiers moved in precise formations. They followed their training perfectly. They maintained proper spacing, established clear fields of fire, and kept constant communication with their commanders. Everything they did was correct according to military science. And that was their weakness. Jake keyed his radio. All units, this is Control. Phase 2 begins now. In different parts of the forest, the remaining humans received the signal. Tony Clark was setting traps along the mercenaries' likely patrol routes. Lisa Hayes was preparing ambush positions near the water sources the aliens would need to use. Kevin Brooks was identifying plants that could be turned into weapons or tools. Nancy White had found something even better. The geologist had located several unstable rock formations in the hills above the mercenary camp. A few carefully placed explosives could bring down enough stone to block escape routes and create panic. Dan Miller worked on a different kind of trap. The electronics expert had been modifying captured alien equipment for the past day. Soon, the Aediri mercenaries would discover that their own weapons could be turned against them. As evening approached, the psychological warfare began in earnest. It started with sounds. Branches breaking in the darkness just outside the light from the mercenary camp. Footsteps that stopped whenever anyone tried to locate their source. Whispers in human languages that none of the aliens understood. Then came the smells. Smoke that carried no visible fire. Chemical odors that suggested weapons being prepared nearby. The scent of cooking food that reminded the hungry mercenaries they were running low on supplies. Finally, there were the sights. Movement in the trees that could have been wind or could have been humans. Reflections of light that might have been eyes watching from the shadows. Equipment that disappeared and reappeared in different locations without explanation. Clack C technician Vorthax checked his scanners for the 100th time. The devices showed nothing unusual. No human life signs, no heat signatures, no electromagnetic anomalies. According to his instruments, the forest was empty except for native animals, but his compound eyes saw things the scanners missed. Shapes that moved wrong, shadows that fell in impossible directions, patterns in the vegetation that suggested intelligent arrangement. Commander Zithak, he buzzed nervously. Recommend immediate orbital bombardment of this position. Something is very wrong with this place. Zithak looked at her own displays. Everything appeared normal according to the instruments. Explain your concern. Vorthax struggled to put his feelings into words. The humans are not behaving like prey. They are behaving like predators who are playing with their food. That night, the attacks escalated. A Gorvani patrol found their path blocked by a web of vines that had not been there hours before. When they cut through the obstacle, they discovered it had been woven together with metal wire taken from their own equipment. The trap delayed them long enough for humans to disappear with more supplies. A Kethmore sniper took position on a high ridge to watch for human movement. Something struck his rifle with perfect precision, damaging the scope and making the weapon useless. He never saw where the shot came from. When he examined the damage later, he found it had been caused by a simple stone thrown with incredible accuracy. A Zephyrian officer tried to radio for orbital support, only to discover his communication unit was broadcasting human music instead of military frequencies. The songs were old Earth ballads about soldiers who died far from home. By morning, Vexitar had lost 43 soldiers to unconsciousness, equipment theft, and psychological breakdown. Not one human had been killed or even seriously injured. His professional army was being taken apart piece by 12 researchers with basic tools. Worse, his troops were starting to whisper among themselves. Stories were spreading through the ranks about humans who could see in perfect darkness, move without making sound, and appear anywhere they chose. Some soldiers claimed the humans could speak directly into their minds. Others insisted the entire forest was working for the enemy. Thrakton approached Vextar's command position with his head lowered in shame. The mighty Gorvani warrior looked tired and confused. "Commander," he said quietly, "my troops are requesting permission to withdraw to the ships." Vextar felt his world crumbling. The Crimson Talons had never retreated from any battle. Their reputation was built on complete victory against impossible odds. But how could they fight an enemy that refused to die, refused to surrender, and refused to follow any rules of warfare they understood? "Denied," Vextar replied. "We finish this mission." But even as he spoke the words, he wondered if the mission was already finished, just not in the way anyone had expected. The third day brought complete chaos to the Crimson Talons. Vextar woke to find half his communication equipment had been stolen during the night. Not destroyed or damaged, but carefully removed piece by piece. Someone had walked through his heavily guarded camp and taken apart military hardware without waking a single sentry. "How?" he demanded of his security chief. The Zephyrian officer could only shake his head. "The guards remember nothing. No sounds, no movement, no alarms. They stayed awake all night watching empty forest. Yet somehow humans moved through our camp like ghosts." Thrakton stared at a device in his 4 hands. It was his personal sidearm returned to him during the night. But it had been modified. Human symbols were carved into the grip. The power cell had been replaced with one that would only fire on the lowest setting. A note in common galactic script was attached. "We could have killed you while you slept. We chose mercy. Choose wisdom." The mighty Gorvani warrior felt something he had never experienced before. Not just fear, but a deep understanding that he was completely outmatched. These humans were not fighting a war. They were teaching a lesson about what real predators could do when they decided to be patient. In the forest, the humans had established a network of hidden camps, connected by paths only they could see. Dr. Lisa Murphy coordinated their movements from a natural cave system that Kevin Brooks had mapped in their first week on the planet. "Status report," she said quietly. Jake Collins consulted notes written on bark with charcoal. 67 enemy soldiers neutralized without casualties. We've captured enough weapons and equipment to arm a small army. Their morale is completely broken. Sam Rodriguez nodded from his position near the cave entrance. "I watched them try to set up a perimeter this morning. Half the soldiers were looking over their shoulders instead of watching their sectors. They're more afraid of us than focused on their mission." Amy Carter had become something none of them expected. The nervous young assistant was now their best scout and infiltrator. Her small size and quiet movement let her get closer to enemy positions than anyone else. "They're talking about retreat," she reported. "The alien commanders are arguing with each other. Some want to call for orbital bombardment. Others want to abandon the mission entirely." Lisa nodded. This was exactly what they had hoped for. Turn the hunters into prey, make the strong feel weak, force the confident to doubt everything they thought they knew about warfare. But Jake's expression was serious. "They're getting desperate. Desperate enemies do stupid things. We need to be ready for anything." He was right to be concerned. Back at the mercenary camp, Vexitar was indeed considering desperate measures. His reputation was built on successful missions completed quickly and efficiently. Every hour that passed on this planet damaged his standing in the mercenary community. Orbital bombardment, he told his weapons officer. Target the entire forest. Burn everything. The weapons officer hesitated. Commander, our troops are scattered throughout that area. We would be killing our own soldiers. Better than returning in disgrace, Vexitar replied coldly. But when he tried to contact his ships in orbit, he discovered the humans had been busy there too. Dan Miller and Rachel Brown had spent days working on captured communication equipment. They had used it to hack into the mercenary fleet's computer systems. Commander, his communications specialist reported in confusion. The orbital ships are not responding. Our signals are being blocked by some kind of interference. What Vexitar did not know was that his ships were receiving very different orders. Commands that appeared to come from his own communication codes told the fleet to hold position and await further instructions. The humans had not just stolen his equipment, they had turned it into weapons against him. As the day progressed, the situation became worse for the mercenaries. Their supply lines were cut. Their escape routes were blocked by fallen trees that seemed to drop at exactly the right moments. Their weapons began malfunctioning in ways that made no sense. A Klaxi soldier's rifle exploded in his hands, but the explosion was carefully controlled to cause noise and smoke without serious injury. A Gorvani trooper's armor locked up, trapping him inside until human voices guided him to the release mechanism. A Zephyrian officer's scanner began displaying human poetry instead of tactical data. The psychological pressure was enormous. These were professional killers who had built their careers on inspiring fear in others. Now they were the ones who jumped at every sound and saw enemies in every shadow. Tony Clark watched a squad of Gorvani soldiers from his hiding place in the trees. The massive warriors moved through the forest like they were walking through a minefield. Every step was careful. Every breath was quiet. They looked around constantly, expecting attack from any direction. But no attack came. That was almost worse than actual fighting. The waiting. The knowing that somewhere nearby humans were watching and planning and choosing when to strike. The terrible awareness that they were completely under enemy control. One of the Gorvani soldiers stopped walking. His breathing became rapid and shallow. His forearms shook as he gripped his weapons. "I cannot do this anymore," he said to his squad mates. "They are everywhere and nowhere. They see everything we do, but we see nothing of them. How do we fight ghosts?" His squad leader tried to maintain discipline. "They are just humans, weak creatures from a soft world. We are warriors from the great battle fleets of Gorvani Prime." "Then why are we losing?" the soldier asked. Nobody had an answer for that question. Alex Johnson, the youngest member of the human team, had been given a special assignment. While the others focused on capturing equipment and neutralizing soldiers, his job was intelligence gathering. He had been listening to alien communications and watching their behavior patterns. "They're breaking," he reported to Dr. Murphy. "Not just tactically, but psychologically. Some of them are having panic attacks. Others are showing signs of combat, trauma. A few are talking about surrender." Lisa found this interesting but not surprising. These aliens came from worlds where warfare was conducted between organized armies using advanced technology. They understood battles with clear objectives, definite outcomes, and recognizable enemies. What they did not understand was survival, warfare, the kind of conflict where victory went to whoever could endure the most hardship, adapt to the worst conditions, and keep fighting when logic said they should give up. Humans had been practicing that kind of warfare for millions of years. Every ancestor who survived winter, plague, predators, natural disasters, and other humans had passed down the genetic instructions for it. Fight when you can, hide when you must, adapt to everything, never surrender. The aliens had forgotten those lessons somewhere in their civilized history. Now they were learning why that was a mistake. Nancy White had been saving the best surprise for last. The geologist had spent days preparing something special in the hills above the mercenary camp. Charges placed at precise locations in the rock formations. Not enough to cause serious harm, but enough to make a statement. That night she triggered the explosions. The sound echoed through the forest like thunder. Stones rained down around the mercenary camp. Dust clouds blocked visibility. Emergency. Lights flashed as soldiers scrambled for cover. When the dust settled, the aliens found a message spelled out in fallen rocks, letters 50 feet tall that could be seen from orbit. The message was simple and clear. Go home. Vextar stared at the gigantic words. His professional army had been reduced to fewer than 100 effective soldiers. His equipment was compromised. His communications were cut. His reputation was destroyed. And 12 humans with basic tools had done it all without killing a single enemy. For the first time in 30 years of warfare, Vextar realized he was facing something completely outside his experience. Something that changed the rules of engagement by ignoring them entirely. The humans were not just winning this battle. They were proving that everything he thought he knew about war was wrong. The fourth day began with surrender. Not the humans surrendering to the Crimson Talons, but individual mercenaries giving up to the humans. It started with a young Klaxki technician who walked into the forest carrying a white cloth tied to a stick. He called out in broken human language, asking for mercy. Amy Carter found him first. The insect-like alien was shaking with fear, his compound eyes darting in every direction. When she approached, he fell to the ground and covered his head with all 6 limbs. Please, he buzzed in panic. No more, I surrender, I go home, never come back. Amy looked at the terrified creature and felt something she had not expected. Pity. This soldier was barely older than she was. He had probably joined the mercenaries looking for adventure and easy money. Now he was learning what real predators looked like. Stand up, she said gently. We won't hurt you. The Klaxki raised his head slowly. You will not kill me? We haven't killed anyone yet, Amy replied. We're not going to start now. Within hours, 12 more mercenaries had surrendered. They came individually or in small groups, carrying improvised white flags and begging for safe passage off the planet. The humans collected their weapons and equipment, then escorted them back to their ships. Jake Collins watched the surrendering soldiers with mixed feelings. Part of him respected their wisdom in giving up a hopeless fight. Part of him was disgusted by how quickly they had broken under pressure that humans would consider normal. Soft, he said to Sam Rodriguez. They're all soft. Take away their technology and their numbers and they fold like paper. Sam nodded. Makes you wonder how they conquered so much of the galaxy. They conquered civilized species, Dr. Lisa. Murphy said, joining their conversation. People who built cities and governments and laws, people who fought wars according to rules and treaties. They never met anyone like us. In the mercenary command center, Vextar faced a complete collapse of discipline. Squad leaders reported mass defections. Equipment continued to disappear. Morale had fallen so low that soldiers were afraid to leave their shelters. Thrakton approached his commander with defeat, written across his features. The proud Gorvani warrior looked like he had aged years in just 4 days. Commander, he said, quietly, I request permission to attempt single combat with the human leader. Vextar stared at him. Single combat? It is the only honorable way to end this, Thrakton replied. I have lost more face in 4 days than in 30 years of warfare. If I must die, let it be with weapons in my hands facing a worthy enemy. Vextar considered the request. Single combat was an ancient tradition among warrior species. If Thrakton won, it might restore some measure of respect to their mission. If he lost, at least he would die with honor intact. Granted, Vexitar said, but choose your opponent carefully. Thrakton walked into the forest alone. He carried his 4 favorite weapons but no armor. His challenge echoed through the trees, in the old warrior tongue of his people. He called for single combat with any human brave enough to face him. The response came from Tony Clark, the former soldier who now handled supply logistics for the research team. Tony was not the largest or strongest human, but he understood what the alien warrior was asking for. They met in a natural clearing where sunlight broke through the forest canopy. Thrakton stood 8 feet tall and weighed 400 pounds. His forearms held weapons that could cut through steel or melt armor. Tony was 6 feet tall and weighed 180 pounds. He carried a knife and a piece of metal pipe. "You are brave but foolish, small human," Thrakton said with respect. "I have killed hundreds of warriors stronger than you." Tony smiled. "Maybe, but how many of them were from Earth?" The fight began with Thrakton using all his advantages. 4 arms moved in perfect coordination. Plasma blasts and vibro blades created a deadly dance of destruction. His combat training was flawless. His technique was perfect. Tony fought like something wild. He used the terrain, the trees, even fallen leaves as weapons. When Thrakton's plasma cannon overheated, Tony was ready. When the alien's vibro blades locked together, Tony struck from an impossible angle. But what broke Thrakton was not Tony's skill or speed or strength. What broke him was Tony's refusal to stay down. The human took damage that should have ended the fight, cuts that should have caused surrender, burns that should have brought unconsciousness. Tony kept fighting. When his knife broke, he used the metal pipe. When the pipe bent, he used his bare hands. When Thrakton landed what should have been a killing blow, Tony rolled away and came back for more. The alien warrior had never faced an opponent who simply would not accept defeat. Every creature he had ever fought understood when they were beaten, they surrendered or fled or died with dignity. Humans did not work that way. The fight ended when Tony grabbed Thrakton's primary weapon during a moment of overconfidence. The human was bleeding from a dozen wounds and should have been unconscious from pain. Instead, he twisted the plasma cannon out of the alien's grip and pointed it at his opponent's head. "Yield," Tony said quietly. Thrakton looked into the human's eyes and saw something that chilled his soul. Not hatred or anger or bloodlust, just calm determination to keep fighting no matter what happened. The alien realized he was facing a species that would rather die than quit. "I yield," he whispered. Tony helped the defeated warrior to his feet. "Good fight. Want to go get some water?" That simple offer of kindness after brutal combat was what finally broke the Gorvani's spirit completely. He had expected to die with honor. Instead, he had been shown mercy by someone who had every right to kill him. Word of Thrakton's defeat spread through the mercenary ranks like wildfire. If their greatest warrior could not defeat a single human in fair combat, what hope did any of them have? The mass retreat began that evening. Soldiers abandoned their positions and ran for the ships. Equipment was left behind. Wounded were carried by their comrades. Officers tried to maintain order, but the panic was complete. Vextar watched his army disintegrate from the bridge of his command ship. In 4 days, the Crimson Talons had gone from a feared mercenary company to a broken rabble fleeing from 12 humans armed with basic tools. "Orbital bombardment," he ordered desperately. "Burn the entire continent. Kill them all." His weapons officer turned from his console with confusion. "Commander, the weapon systems are not responding. Some kind of computer virus has infected our targeting systems." Dan Miller's electronic warfare had reached even into orbit. The human communications expert had turned the mercenaries' own technology against them so completely that they could not even use their ship's weapons. As the Crimson Talons prepared for emergency departure, Dr. Lisa Murphy contacted them on an open channel. Her voice was calm and professional. "This is Dr. Murphy at Kepler Research Station. Your wounded will be treated and returned to you. Your equipment will be left at the landing pad. You're dead." She paused. "There are no dead. We could have killed you all, but we chose not to." Vexatar found his voice. "Why?" "Because that's what humans do," Lisa replied. "We fight when we have to, but we don't kill when we don't have to. Remember that when you tell people about this place." The last mercenary ship lifted off 6 hours later. Of the 200 professional soldiers who had come to eliminate 12 human researchers, only 97 left the planet. The rest had surrendered, been captured, or simply disappeared into the forest. None had been killed by human action. 3 months later, in a bar on the space station Sigma Draconis, a group of mercenaries discussed potential contracts. The pay was good and the risk seemed minimal. The targets were human colonies that needed to be discouraged. A scarred Zephyrian at the end of the bar looked up from his drink. He was one of the few survivors of the Crimson Talon's disaster. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard him. "Find another job," he said. "Trust me on this." A young Kethmore warrior laughed. "Afraid of humans? They're just soft creatures from a garden world." The Zephyrian's expression did not change. "I've seen what humans do when you corner them. They don't just fight back. They teach you why your species learned to be afraid of the dark." The bar grew quiet. Stories had been spreading through the mercenary community about the disaster at Kepler 442b. Most people thought they were exaggerated. Scared soldiers telling tall tales to excuse their failures. But those who looked closely at the survivor reports found disturbing patterns. Every mercenary company that had taken contracts against human targets was either destroyed or had retreated, in complete defeat. The humans fought with a ferocity and creativity that no other species could match. Word spread through the underworld. Human colonies were to be left alone. Human research stations were off limits. Human cargo ships were not to be touched. The species that came from the world called Earth was too dangerous to threaten. Back on Kepler 442b, Dr. Lisa Murphy returned to her research work. The team had learned valuable lessons about their planet's ecosystem. They had also learned something about themselves and their place in the galaxy. Jake Collins organized regular combat training sessions for all team members, not because he expected another attack, but because he now understood that being human meant being ready for anything. "Every world we settle becomes a death world," he explained to Amy Carter during one training session. "Not because we make them dank,